Sympathetic nervous system. Visceral innervation. In neurobiology, the adjective visceral is applied to innervated smooth and cardiac muscle and secretory cells in all parts of the body. The primary role of visceral innervation is to maintain optimal homeostasis.
Hi, in this video we're going to have a look at the divisions of the nervous system. First of all, we'll have a look at the anatomical divisions of the nervous system. So here's a brain, and hanging down from the brain is the spinal cord. Now these two structures make up the central nervous system, or the CNS. Now there are 6 different sets of nerves which arise from the CNS. There are 12 from the brain and brainstem, and 31 pairs from the spinal cord. The ones coming from the brain and brainstem are called cranial nerves, and we denote those CN 1 to 12, and we normally use Roman numerals. The next set are called the cervical, and there's 8 of those, C1 to C8. Then thoracic, there's 12, which we name T1 to T12. Then the lumbar nerves, which has 5, L1 to L5. The sacral, which are S1 to S5. And then one little nerve right down the bottom called the coccygeal nerve. And we call that CX1. Now these nerves here are known as the peripheral nerves. And these nerves are called the cranial nerves. Together, they make up the peripheral nervous system. So these are the nerves that lie outside of the CNS. Now there's one more division, and some people call this a functional or an anatomical division, but here I've displayed it as an anatomical division. It's the enteric nervous system. So this is a nervous system of the digestive tract. So the digestive tract has its own nervous system, which allows it to function even if it's removed from the body. It won't function for very long, but it knows where food is within the tract and knows how to control its contractions. Now this is done through a bunch of little cells and networks between these cells, and they're known as the interstitial cells of Cajard, and they're pacemaker cells, which basically allow for coordinated contraction. Now let's have a look at the functional divisions of the nervous system. So, the nervous system comprises of the brain, the brainstem, the spinal cord, and all the nerves that come off it. And there are 2 divisions. The autonomic division and the somatic division. Now the autonomic are the involuntary nerves. They're the ones that we can't control consciously. The somatic, however, are voluntary, so we can control those consciously. Now these are mainly used for muscular movements and also for sensation. Now the autonomic nervous system looks after all our organs which we don't control consciously. And there are 2 branches of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic is a
Afferent signals of visceral origin reach the central nervous system through primary sensory neurons, similar to those for general sensation. Under normal conditions, these impulses elicit reflex responses in viscera and feelings of fullness, of hollow organs such as the stomach, large intestine, and urinary bladder. Visceral sensation also contributes to feelings of well-being and malaise. In the presence of abnormal function and disease, visceral afferents transmit impulses for pain. The painful sensation often is referred to a part of the body wall or a limb supplied by the same segmental nerves as the affected organ. The motor efferent supply of smooth muscle cells, cardiac muscle, and gland cells differs from that of voluntary muscles in that the connection between the central nervous system and the viscus consists of a succession of at least two neurons rather than a single motor neuron. The cell body of the first neuron is in the brainstem or the spinal cord. Its axon terminates on a neuron in an autonomic ganglion, and the axon of the later neuron ends either on effector cells or on a third neuron. The first and second neurons are called preganglionic and postganglionic neurons, respectively.
Hi, it's Mr. Anderson. Today I'm going to talk about the fight or flight reaction. This is one of my favorite videos on YouTube. This is from youtube.com/Russia today. So we got this person here walking down the street. All of a sudden they realize there's a car coming, and then they get out of the way. Now if I were to keep playing it, the guy jumps out of the car, comes running in this direction. But basically, I want to talk about what's going on. So once this guy sees the car, how does he, number one, get out of the way? And then how does that affect his body? How does that affect the organs and the chemistry and all of that inside his body? And so that whole thing is called the fight or flight. And so when I ask students, how does he get out of the way of the car? The answer is always adrenaline. And the right answer is no, it's not adrenaline. Adrenaline's not going to be able to get there that quickly. And so how does the guy really get out of the way? Well, he's going to see the car coming. He's going to process that in his brain, and then he's going to send a message down his nervous system. That nervous system is going to be attached to muscles, and those muscles are going to have ATP ready to go. And so the way he's able to jump out of the way and not get hit by the car doesn't have anything to do with the fight or flight response. It's simply his nervous system, his muscles, and just responding to that threat immediately. But if you've ever been in a situation like that where you just barely survive an accident or something like that, all of a sudden you feel this rush of just your heart starts beating faster, you're breathing, you feel warm. Now that's part of the fight or flight response, because this guy right here, since he's living in a city, is able to just kind of walk back onto the road and keep about his business. But back in the day, if you were attacked by a mountain lion or somebody else, you had to fight now. You had to flee, or you had to attack the attacker. And so all of that is part of what's called the sympathetic nervous system, or that system inside our body that allows us to fight or flight. And so let's zoom inside this guy and talk a little bit more about how the fight or flight works. And so it's basically centered around his brain. And so in the center of his brain, near the bottom, we have something called the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus, in that area of the brain, is essentially going to send a signal. Now that signal, not only are we getting signals that are going to the muscles that allow you to move, but it's going to send a signal all the way down, a nervous signal all the way down here. Because in the center of our adrenal gland, we have something called the adrenal medulla. It's connected nervously to the brain. So the moment he sees that car and realizes he might die, there's a signal being sent to the adrenal medulla, or the center of the adrenal gland. It's going to give off what's called adrenaline, and that adrenaline is epinephrine. Epinephrine is a chemical signal that is going to be attached to the circulatory system, and so it's going to course through the body. So as his heart beats faster and faster and faster, epinephrine is going to flow throughout the rest of the body. Now, epinephrine is not going to go into the cells of the body. It's simply going to if we say this is a big liver cell, it's simply going to bind to proteins on the surface of those cells. And so what's it going to do to the liver? Well, in the liver, what it's going to do is it's going to trigger a signal transduction pathway that's going to convert glycogen that's found inside the cells of the liver, and it's going to release that as glucose. Why is it doing that? Well, glucose is our energy supply, and so now glucose is going to be coursing through our body along with epinephrine, and so now we have a supply of energy, so we can quickly break down that glucose, get ATP, and we can do more out of it. But what's interesting is that epinephrine is going to go other places in the body, and it's going to have different responses depending on where it goes. And so what is epinephrine going to do to the cells that are in control of the breathing, the cells of the lung? It's going to speed up that breathing rate. What's epinephrine going to do when it goes to the cells of the heart? It's going to speed up the rate of the heartbeat. And so it's going to trigger a signal transduction pathway in the heart that's very similar to the signal transduction pathway that we find in the liver cells. However, it's going to have a different response inside the cells. It's going to not release glucose, but it's going to increase the rate of the beating of those cardiac cells. What do you think would happen to the digestive system? Well, epinephrine's going to go there. Epinephrine's going to go there as well. But what it's going to do is it's going to vasoconstrict, so it's going to slow down digestion. And so it's going to slow down those blood vessels that feed those areas that allow us to break down and digest food, because when you're getting out of the way of a car or fighting an attacker, you don't really need to concentrate on breaking down that bagel that you ate for breakfast. So it's going to shut that down, but it's going to go to the muscles of your body and it's going to vasodilate, and so it's going to move more blood to those areas. And so our whole body is designed so we can have one signal, that epinephrine, but it can have all these different responses throughout the rest of the body. And so that's going to allow our body to respond to that threat, and that's why your heart races, you breathe faster, your pupils dilate, all that happens, and you can thank epinephrine for that. And it's that chemical response and the different either gene expression or signal transduction pathways that we have as a result. And so I hope that's helpful.
Autonomic system, visceral efferent. The smooth muscle cells, secretory cells of viscera, and also cardiac muscle come under the dual influence of the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system. In some organs, these are functionally antagonistic, and a delicate balance between the two systems maintains a more or less constant level of visceral activity. Autonomic innervation extends beyond the organs of the major body cavities to include muscles of the iris and ciliary body in the eye, smooth muscles in the orbit, the lacrimal and salivary glands, sweat glands, and arrector pili muscles of the skin, and blood vessels everywhere. Neurotransmitters. The preganglionic neurons are invariably cholinergic. The principal cells are all cholinergic in parasympathetic ganglia, but only a small proportion of them are cholinergic in the sympathetic ganglia. Most of the principal cells of sympathetic ganglia are noradrenergic at their peripheral synapses. The intrinsic neurons of the ganglia contains dopamine, which they are believed to use as a neurotransmitter. All the neurons in autonomic ganglia also contain two or more peptides, which may serve as additional neurotransmitter or as neuromodulators. Several clinically valuable drugs selectively enhance or inhibit both the synthesis and the metabolism of acetylcholine, dopamine, and noradrenaline. Thanks.